Your immune system wakes up every morning looking for direction, and breakfast can provide it. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but quietly through signals your body has been responding to for decades. After 60, those morning signals matter more than ever because the immune system becomes increasingly sensitive to what it encounters first each day. Here's what really happens as we age: chronic inflammation slowly rises in the background. You don't always feel it, but it affects how your joints move, how your heart functions, and how clearly your brain thinks. Scientists sometimes refer to this as low grade inflammation, and it's one of the strongest drivers of aging related discomfort and disease. The immune system isn't broken, but it becomes less efficient at turning inflammation off once it's no longer needed. One of the most overlooked influences on this process is what you eat in the morning. Breakfast sets the tone for blood sugar levels, metabolic stability, and immune signaling for the rest of the day. When the first meal is heavy in refined carbohydrates or added sugars, the immune system receives a signal of stress. Blood sugar rises quickly, insulin spikes, and inflammatory pathways are activated. This doesn't cause immediate harm, but repeated day after day, it contributes to joint stiffness, vascular strain, and cognitive fatigue. On the other hand, research from institutions like Harvard and the Cleveland Clinic has shown that certain breakfast foods send the opposite signal. They help calm inflammatory responses, stabilize blood sugar, and support immune balance. These foods don't suppress inflammation aggressively. They guide it gently, allowing the immune system to respond accurately instead of overreacting. You'll notice that people who eat these kinds of breakfasts often describe steadier energy, less mid morning fatigue, and fewer aches as the day progresses. That's not coincidence. It reflects reduced inflammatory signaling and improved metabolic control. When inflammation is lower, immune cells function more precisely and tissues recover more efficiently. Another important factor is how breakfast affects the gut. A large portion of your immune system resides in the digestive tract. Foods rich in natural fibers, healthy fats, and plant compounds help nourish beneficial gut bacteria. These bacteria play a key role in training immune cells to distinguish between real threats and harmless signals. As we age, this training becomes increasingly important. You may also notice improvements in mental clarity. Chronic inflammation affects the brain by disrupting blood flow and neurotransmitter balance. When breakfast helps lower inflammatory load, the brain benefits as well. Studies have linked anti inflammatory dietary patterns with better cognitive function in older adults. What makes this especially powerful is consistency. The immune system responds to patterns, not isolated choices. One healthy breakfast won't change everything, but a supportive breakfast eaten most days sends a repeated message to the immune system. That message says the body is nourished, stable, and not under metabolic stress. It's also important to understand that anti inflammatory eating doesn't require perfection or restriction. The immune system doesn't need strict rules, it needs recognizable, supportive signals. Foods that have been part of traditional diets for generations tend to work best because the body knows how to interpret them. Over time, these morning signals accumulate, inflammation settles more quickly after stress, joints feel less stiff, energy becomes more predictable. These changes reflect improved immune regulation, not dramatic intervention. After 60, supporting the immune system is less about fighting inflammation and more about guiding it. Breakfast is one of the simplest opportunities to do that. It's a daily moment where small choices quietly influence how your immune system behaves for the rest of the day. As you continue watching, you'll see which specific breakfast food sends one of the strongest anti inflammatory signals and why it has such a powerful effect on immune balance after 60. After 60, chronic low grade inflammation tends to rise quietly in the body, often without dramatic symptoms or clear warning signs. This is why it's so easy to overlook. You may not feel sick, you may not feel injured, yet inside the body, immune activity becomes slightly elevated and slower to resolve, creating a constant background hum of inflammation that affects how tissues age and recover. This type of inflammation is very different from the short term inflammation that helps heal a cut or fight an infection. Acute inflammation is protective and temporary. Chronic inflammation, on the other hand, lingers. It stays active even when there is no immediate threat. Over time, this persistent immune activity places stress on joints, blood vessels, and the brain. You'll notice the effects gradually. Joints may feel stiff in the morning and take longer to loosen. Recovery after physical activity may slow. Fatigue can appear without a clear reason. Mentally, focus may feel less sharp. These changes are often dismissed as just aging, but they are frequently linked to ongoing inflammatory signals that haven't fully shut off. As we age, the immune system becomes less efficient at resolving inflammation once it's no longer needed. Immune cells still respond, but the off switch doesn't work as smoothly as it once did. Researchers sometimes refer to this process as inflammaging, a slow increase in inflammatory activity that accompanies aging and contributes to many age related conditions. This matters because inflammation influences nearly every system in the body. In the joints, it contributes to stiffness, swelling, and discomfort. In the cardiovascular system, it affects the inner lining of blood vessels, increasing strain on the heart and circulation. In the brain, it interferes with blood flow and chemical signaling, which can affect memory, mood, and clarity. What makes chronic inflammation particularly challenging after 60 is that it often builds silently. Blood tests may not always capture it clearly. Symptoms are subtle and gradual. By the time inflammation becomes obvious, it may have been active for years. This is why prevention and daily regulation are so important. Lifestyle plays a major role in how this inflammation develops. The immune system is constantly responding to signals from food, stress, sleep, and movement. When those signals are irregular or stressful, immune cells remain partially activated. Over time, this constant activation becomes the new normal. Diet is one of the strongest influences. Certain foods promote inflammatory signaling, especially when consumed regularly. Highly refined carbohydrates, excess added sugars, and processed foods can repeatedly activate immune pathways that promote inflammation. When this happens day after day, the immune system stays on alert even when there is no danger. At the same time, aging bodies become more sensitive to these signals. What once caused only a small response can now trigger a larger, longer lasting inflammatory reaction. This sensitivity is why chronic inflammation becomes more common after 60, even when overall calorie intake is lower than it used to be. Stress compounds the problem. Emotional and psychological stress increases inflammatory hormones in the body. When stress becomes chronic, immune regulation suffers. The immune system struggles to distinguish between real physical threats and ongoing emotional tension. Both are treated as danger signals. Sleep also plays a role. Poor or inconsistent sleep prevents the immune system from completing its nightly repair and reset process. Without adequate recovery time, inflammatory responses linger into the next day, accumulating over time. What's important to understand is that chronic inflammation is not an inevitable part of aging. It's common, but it's not unavoidable. The immune system remains adaptable well into later decades of life. It responds to changes in its environment, especially when those changes are consistent and gentle. Lowering inflammation after 60 isn't about suppressing the immune system, it's about guiding it. The goal is to help immune cells respond when needed and resolve inflammation when it's no longer useful. This requires steady, predictable signals rather than extreme interventions. When inflammation is reduced, the effects ripple through the body. Joints move more freely, energy becomes steadier, blood vessels function more smoothly, cognitive clarity improves. These benefits don't appear overnight, but they accumulate quietly as immune balance improves. Understanding chronic inflammation is the first step toward addressing it. Once you recognize that much of aging related discomfort is linked to ongoing immune activation, it becomes clear why daily habits, especially the first signals of the day, play such an important role in shaping long term health after 60. Breakfast acts as the first immune and metabolic signal of the day, and after 60, that first signal carries more influence than most people realize. When you wake up, your immune system is transitioning out of a nightly repair mode and preparing to respond to the demands of the day. What you eat at that moment helps determine whether immune activity stays calm and regulated or shifts toward inflammation and metabolic stress. During sleep, the body works to resolve inflammation, repair tissues, and reset immune signaling. By morning, immune cells are ready to receive new information. Breakfast becomes the first major piece of information they encounter. This is why the first meal doesn't just provide energy, it shapes how immune and metabolic systems behave for hours afterward. As we age, blood sugar regulation becomes less flexible, the body is slower to correct sharp rises and falls in glucose. When breakfast causes a rapid blood sugar spike, insulin levels rise quickly, and immune cells interpret this as a stress signal. Stress signals activate inflammatory pathways designed to protect the body in emergencies. When this happens occasionally, the body adapts. When it happens daily, inflammation becomes the default response. You may notice this in how you feel mid morning. Energy rises quickly and then drops. Hunger returns sooner than expected. Joints may feel stiff. Focus becomes harder to maintain. These sensations are signs that immune and metabolic systems are working harder than they need to. Research from metabolic and immunology studies has shown that stable blood sugar levels are closely linked to lower inflammatory markers, especially in older adults. Breakfast plays a central role in establishing that stability. When the first meal provides slow, steady energy, immune cells remain calmer and more responsive. Another important aspect is timing. Breakfast signals the start of the body's active phase. It helps synchronize circadian rhythms, which influence immune cell movement and activity throughout the day. When breakfast is skipped or highly irregular, immune timing becomes less precise. This can contribute to immune dysregulation and increased inflammation over time. The immune system also responds to the nutrient composition of breakfast. Protein, healthy fats, and natural fibers slow digestion and provide a steady release of energy. This prevents sharp metabolic stress signals. In contrast, refined carbohydrates digest quickly and send urgent signals that something unusual is happening in the bloodstream. After 60, immune cells become more sensitive to these metabolic fluctuations. What once caused a mild response can now trigger a stronger inflammatory reaction. This increased sensitivity is one reason why breakfast choices matter more with age than they did earlier in life. Breakfast also influences the gut, which is a major immune organ. The digestive tract contains a large portion of immune cells, and these cells respond quickly to what enters the gut. A breakfast that supports beneficial gut bacteria helps reinforce immune tolerance, meaning the immune system learns what to ignore and what to respond to. This reduces unnecessary inflammation. You may notice that when breakfast is balanced, digestion feels smoother, bloating is reduced, energy lasts longer. These effects reflect improved communication between the gut and immune system. Consistency amplifies these benefits. Eating a supportive breakfast most days trains the immune system to expect stability. This expectation reduces background immune activation. The body stops bracing for metabolic stress and shifts toward regulation. This doesn't require eating the same foods every day. It requires maintaining similar nutritional signals, whole foods, balanced energy, gentle digestion. When those signals repeat, immune responses become more accurate and inflammation resolves more efficiently. Another overlooked benefit of a supportive breakfast is its effect on decision making later in the day. Stable blood sugar reduces cravings and impulsive eating, which further supports immune balance. One good morning signal often leads to better signals throughout the day. Stress also interacts with breakfast choices. When the body is under stress, immune sensitivity increases. A breakfast that stabilizes metabolism helps buffer the immune system against stress induced inflammation. This buffering effect becomes increasingly valuable after 60. Breakfast is not about rules or restriction, it is about communication. The immune system listens closely to the first message it receives each day. When that message signals nourishment and stability, immune activity stays balanced. When it signals urgency and disruption, inflammation follows. After 60, choosing a supportive breakfast becomes one of the simplest ways to guide immune behavior. It's a daily opportunity to set the tone for inflammation, energy, and resilience long before symptoms appear. Refined, high sugar breakfast foods trigger inflammatory pathways in ways that are easy to miss but powerful over time, especially after 60. These foods don't cause immediate damage or dramatic symptoms. Instead, they create small metabolic disturbances that repeat day after day, slowly shaping how the immune system behaves and how the body ages. When you eat a breakfast high in refined carbohydrates or added sugars, digestion happens very quickly. Glucose enters the bloodstream fast, and the body responds by releasing a surge of insulin to bring blood sugar back down. In younger years, the body handles this swing more efficiently. After 60, that correction becomes slower and less precise. Blood sugar stays elevated longer, and insulin remains higher than necessary. The immune system interprets these rapid swings as stress signals. Elevated glucose and insulin levels activate inflammatory pathways designed to protect the body during emergencies. These pathways increase the production of inflammatory molecules that help mobilize resources quickly. When this response happens, occasionally the body recovers. When it happens, most mornings, inflammation becomes habitual. You may notice subtle signs. Morning energy rises quickly and then drops. Hunger returns earlier. Joints feel stiff. Hands or knees may ache more than usual. Focus feels scattered. These sensations are not random. They reflect inflammatory signaling driven by repeated metabolic stress. Research has consistently linked diets high in refined carbohydrates and added sugars to increase levels of inflammatory markers, particularly in older adults. These markers are associated with joint discomfort, vascular strain, and cognitive decline over time. The immune system isn't malfunctioning, it's responding exactly as it was designed to respond to stress. Another issue is how refined foods affect the gut. Highly processed breakfast foods are often low in fiber and nutrients that support beneficial gut bacteria. When gut bacteria are undernourished, the immune system loses an important source of regulation. Beneficial bacteria help train immune cells to distinguish between harmless signals and real threats. Without that guidance, immune responses become less selective. This loss of selectivity contributes to chronic inflammation. The immune system becomes more reactive because it lacks clear boundaries. This is especially problematic after 60 when immune tolerance naturally declines. Foods that disrupt gut balance amplify this effect. Refined breakfasts also influence oxidative stress. Rapid glucose spikes increase the production of free radicals, unstable molecules that damage cells. The immune system responds to this damage by activating inflammatory repair processes. Over time, repeated oxidative stress accelerates tissue aging and increases inflammatory burden. You may also notice that refined breakfasts affect mood and mental clarity. Blood sugar swings influence neurotransmitters in the brain. When glucose drops after a spike, the brain experiences it as a form of stress. This can lead to irritability, fatigue, and difficulty concentrating. These mental effects are closely linked to inflammatory signaling in the brain. Another overlooked factor is appetite regulation. High sugar breakfasts often fail to satisfy hunger because they lack protein and healthy fats. This leads to overeating later in the day, compounding metabolic stress. Each additional spike reinforces inflammatory pathways, creating a cycle that becomes harder to break with age. After 60, the body becomes more sensitive to these cycles. What once caused mild fluctuations now produces larger, longer lasting effects. This sensitivity is why breakfast choices matter more with age. The immune system has less tolerance for repeated disruption. It's important to understand that this isn't about eliminating enjoyment or following rigid rules. It's about recognizing patterns. Occasional indulgence is not the issue, repetition is. When refined, sugary foods become the default morning signal, inflammation becomes the default immune response. Stress further amplifies this effect. When psychological stress is present, the immune system is already primed toward activation. Adding metabolic stress through refined breakfasts compounds the inflammatory load. This combination is particularly challenging for joints, blood vessels, and the brain. What makes this pattern so common is convenience. Refined breakfast foods are easy, fast, and familiar, but ease does not equal support. The immune system responds to quality, not convenience. Breaking this cycle doesn't require drastic change, it requires awareness, recognizing that certain breakfast patterns quietly push the immune system toward inflammation is the first step. Once that pattern is visible, it becomes easier to choose foods that send a calmer signal instead. After 60, the immune system benefits most from stability. Refined, high sugar breakfasts disrupt that stability repeatedly. Reducing their frequency allows inflammatory pathways to quiet down, helping the immune system return to a more balanced, resilient state over time. Certain traditional anti inflammatory breakfast foods have a unique ability to calm immune responses, especially after 60, because they work with the body's natural regulatory systems rather than pushing against them. These foods don't act like drugs that force inflammation down. Instead, they gently guide immune behavior, helping the body respond appropriately and resolve inflammation more efficiently. As we age, the immune system becomes more sensitive to the signals it receives from food. Immune cells rely on nutrients to communicate, repair tissue, and regulate inflammatory pathways. When breakfast includes foods that provide steady energy and supportive compounds, immune activity becomes more balanced. When those foods are missing, immune responses tend to become exaggerated or prolonged. Traditional anti inflammatory breakfast foods share several characteristics. They digest slowly, provide stable blood sugar, and contain natural compounds that reduce oxidative stress. These qualities send a clear message to the immune system that the body is nourished and not under threat. This message becomes increasingly important after 60 when the immune system is less tolerant of metabolic disruption. Research from nutritional science has shown that foods rich in polyphenols, healthy fats, and natural fibers help lower inflammatory markers in older adults. These compounds don't block inflammation entirely, which would be harmful. They help regulate it, allowing immune cells to switch off inflammatory responses once their job is done. You may notice that when breakfast includes these foods, energy feels steadier, hunger returns more slowly, joints feel less stiff. These sensations reflect improved immune regulation and reduced metabolic stress. The body isn't scrambling to correct blood sugar swings or respond to oxidative damage. Another critical benefit is how these foods support gut health. The gut contains a large portion of the immune system, and the bacteria living there play a major role in immune education. Fiber rich foods nourish beneficial bacteria, which produce compounds that help immune cells learn tolerance. This reduces unnecessary immune activation and chronic inflammation. After 60, this gut immune connection becomes even more important. The diversity of gut bacteria tends to decline with age, and immune tolerance weakens. Anti inflammatory breakfast foods help counteract this decline by supporting a healthier microbial environment. This, in turn, improves immune communication throughout the body, Healthy fats also play a role. Certain fats help stabilize cell membranes and support signaling between immune cells. When these fats are present regularly, immune responses become smoother and more coordinated. This reduces the likelihood of excessive inflammation affecting joints, blood vessels, and brain tissue. Traditional breakfast foods that have been part of human diets for generations tend to work well because the body recognizes them. The immune system evolved alongside these foods. It knows how to interpret their signals. This familiarity reduces stress responses and supports regulation. You may also notice cognitive benefits. Chronic inflammation affects blood flow and chemical signaling in the brain. When inflammation is lower, mental clarity improves. Studies have linked anti inflammatory dietary patterns with better cognitive performance in older adults, reinforcing the importance of these foods beyond physical comfort. Consistency amplifies these effects. One supportive breakfast won't transform immune health overnight, but repeated exposure trains immune cells to expect stability. Over time, this expectation reduces background inflammation and improves immune efficiency. Another benefit is reduced oxidative stress. Anti inflammatory foods often contain antioxidants that neutralize free radicals produced during normal metabolism. By reducing oxidative damage, these foods lessen the need for inflammatory repair processes, easing immune workload. It's also important to recognize that these foods don't require perfection. Portions don't need to be exact. Meals don't need to be elaborate. The immune system responds to overall pattern, not isolated details. A simple, supportive breakfast eaten most days provides a strong signal. Stress interacts with diet in powerful ways. When stress is high, immune sensitivity increases. Anti inflammatory foods help buffer this effect by stabilizing metabolism and supporting gut signaling. This buffering effect becomes more valuable as stress resilience naturally declines with age. After 60, guiding inflammation through food is one of the most practical strategies available. Traditional anti inflammatory breakfast foods work quietly in the background, supporting immune balance without strain or complexity. Over time, they help the immune system remain responsive, regulated, and resilient as the body continues to age. Consistent morning nutrition patterns reduce inflammation more effectively than occasional perfect meals because the immune system is shaped by repetition, not by isolated choices. After 60, immune cells become less responsive to sporadic signals and more responsive to patterns they can rely on. This is why what you do most days matters far more than what you do occasionally. The immune system learns through exposure. When it repeatedly encounters stable, supportive signals, it adapts its behavior accordingly. When signals are inconsistent, immune responses become less precise. One healthy breakfast followed by several days of metabolic stress does not provide enough information for immune cells to adjust. Consistency creates clarity. You'll notice this in how the body responds over time. When breakfast is supportive most days, inflammation settles more quickly after physical or emotional stress. Joints recover faster, energy feels steadier. These changes don't come from dramatic improvements in diet quality, but from reduced fluctuation. The immune system thrives when it knows what to expect. Research in nutritional immunology supports this idea. Studies show that inflammatory markers respond more to long term dietary patterns than to short term interventions. Older adults who maintain stable eating habits with whole, minimally processed foods tend to have lower baseline inflammation than those who alternate between extremes. This suggests that immune cells prioritize predictability over intensity. After 60, the immune system becomes less flexible in adapting to sudden changes. Rapid dietary shifts, even toward healthier foods, can initially feel stressful to the body. Consistent, gradual patterns allow immune regulation to improve without triggering stress responses. This is why slow, steady changes are more effective than abrupt overhauls. Consistency also affects blood sugar regulation. When breakfast quality varies widely from day to day, blood sugar control becomes unpredictable. These fluctuations activate inflammatory pathways repeatedly. A consistent morning meal helps stabilize glucose and insulin responses, reducing immune stress over time. You may notice that when breakfast is predictable, appetite regulation improves. Cravings become less intense. This reduces the likelihood of overeating later in the day, which further supports immune balance. One consistent choice in the morning often leads to better choices throughout the day. Another important factor is how consistency influences gut health. Beneficial gut bacteria thrive on regularity. When fiber intake fluctuates widely, microbial balance becomes unstable. Stable breakfast patterns support a more diverse and resilient gut microbiome. This stability improves immune tolerance and reduces unnecessary activation. Sleep also interacts with consistency. When meal timing and composition are predictable, circadian rhythms become more stable. Stable rhythms support immune cell timing and repair processes. Inconsistent eating can disrupt these rhythms, contributing to inflammation. Stress resilience improves with routine. Predictable habits reduce decision fatigue and mental strain. Lower psychological stress translates into lower immune stress. This mind body connection becomes more important after 60 when stress recovery naturally slows. It's important to understand that consistency does not mean rigidity. It allows for flexibility within a supportive framework. Occasional indulgences do not undo progress. What matters is the baseline pattern the immune system experiences most often. You may also notice emotional benefits. When the body feels stable internally, mood tends to stabilize as well. Reduced inflammation is associated with improved emotional regulation. This reinforces the value of consistent habits beyond physical health. The immune system after 60 values familiarity. Familiar foods, familiar timing, familiar routines reduce the need for constant adaptation. This allows immune resources to be conserved and used more efficiently. Over time, consistent morning nutrition becomes a form of immune training. It teaches immune cells what normal looks like. This makes it easier to recognize abnormalities and respond appropriately. Without this training, immune responses become less accurate. Consistency also simplifies decision making. When breakfast follows a familiar pattern, there is less uncertainty and stress at the start of the day. This calm beginning sets the tone for immune regulation hours later. After 60, lowering inflammation is less about finding the perfect meal and more about repeating supportive choices often enough for the immune system to learn from them. Consistent morning nutrition quietly guides immune balance, helping inflammation resolve more efficiently and supporting long term health without complexity or pressure.